For Comedy Hype News, I'm Terrence Sims. The road to success is a long journey filled with plenty of obstacles. Some say that rejection is a form of God's protection. The denial of something you may not be ready for, and it may work in your favor in the long run if you stay persistent. A young black queen came up with a R&B proverb when she said, "If at first you don't succeed, then you dust yourself off and try it again." We've heard of superstar comedians auditioning to be part of a show only to make a bigger name for themselves after. A young Martin Lawrence and Chris Rock auditioned for In Living Color, but Keenan didn't think they were ready. Lawrence and Rock continued to work hard, and eventually they made it to where they were supposed to be. The same goes for Jim Carrey, who auditioned for Saturday Night Live time and time again, only to be rejected every single time, never making it to the full cast. Thankfully, Carrey stayed persistent and never gave up on his dreams, because if he did, we would have been robbed of one of the greatest comedic actors and characters of all time. Here are the times Jim Carrey auditioned for Saturday Night Live. At the time of his first audition, Carrey was 18 years old and still a novice when it comes to stand-up comedy. Working as the opening act for comedian Rodney Dangerfield, it allowed him to come face-to-face with the casting directors of SNL, even if it was prematurely. Carrey's audition took place in the 1980-1981 season. This was the first season without the original cast, which included Chevy Chase, Garrett Morris, Bill Murray, John Belushi, and more. Not only did the original cast depart from the season, but the show's original creator, Lorne Michaels, had also left. Aside from the show's recognizable and popular talent leaving, the new crew behind the scenes had gone back and forth to see who they were going to hire. Finalists were Charlie Barnett, Robert Townsend, and Eddie Murphy. At the time, Jim Carrey was 18 years old, while Murphy, who got the gig, was 19. It's hard to believe the producers of the show would take a chance and hire two unknown teenagers, so they decided to go with Murphy, who ended up being the youngest cast member at the time, and before the record was broken by Anthony Michael Hall at the age of 17 in 1985. Gilbert Gottfried, Joe Piscopo, and Charles Rocket were a few of the other hires for the season. According to the article at the time, Carrey didn't quite have the necessary comedic polish and originality. An 18-year-old Carrey auditioned for SNL with the post-nuclear Elvis. The impersonation required a t-shirt joke that made him look like he had tiny arms. It makes sense that an 18-year-old Jim Carrey wouldn't be the Jim Carrey we all know today. He still needed another decade to develop his comedic abilities, as this just wasn't his time. This may have been the break Carrey needed. As the sixth season drew to a close, Eddie Murphy and Joe Piscopo were the only remaining cast members from the start of the season. Everyone else was fired. John Goodman and Paul Reubens, who would later become better known as Pee Wee Herman, also auditioned and were rejected the same year. In 1981, Carrey's first credited role was the TV movie Rubberface. The film was shot in Canada and released there as Introducing Janet. The film follows an overweight woman who makes the other children in school laugh by making fun of her own weight. Carrey co-stars as a struggling comedian who helps her with self-esteem while she helps him with jokes. Carrey followed that up with three small projects in 1983 before landing his first starring role in the short-lived NBC sitcom The Duck Factory. The series followed Carrey as an inspiring cartoonist who had just moved to Hollywood. He stumbles upon an animation company and is hired. The series lasted 13 episodes and was canceled in the summer of 1984. 5 years after his first audition, and now with a little more experience under his belt, a 23-year-old Jim Carrey set his sights on auditioning for SNL once again. This season featured the aforementioned youngest cast member ever, Anthony Michael Hall, along with Robert Downey Jr., John Lovitz, Dennis Miller, Joan Cusack, Randy Quaid, and Damon Wayans. Wayans would be fired halfway through the season for going against the script on live television. The 1985-1986 season was criticized heavily for its relatively young and inexperienced cast. By this time, Eddie Murphy had left the show 2 seasons prior to focus on his promising movie career. This was also the season where Lorne Michaels made his return as executive producer after taking a hiatus for 5 seasons. When interviewed for SNL's 40th anniversary, The Hollywood Reporter caught up with many who were a part of the show's history. Lorne Michaels recalled a moment where he wasn't aware of Carrey's audition. "I wasn't at the Jim Carrey audition, but somebody who was there said, 'I don't think Lorne would like it.' They were probably wrong, but it doesn't matter. Or maybe they were right, who knows? No one gets it all right." Jim Carrey never auditioned for me personally. There is an audition tape which we almost played on the 25th anniversary show. If he had come that night, we would have. We have all the audition tapes. Carrey, I think, auditioned for Al Franken the year I was executive producer, and Tom Davis and Al were the producers along with Jim Downey. In 1985, when Brandon got me to come back, his whole argument was I had to learn how to delegate. Dick had run in successfully that way, and so Tom, Al, and Jim did their stuff, and I sort of approved things. But later that season, when Brandon was again thinking about canceling the show, he told me, "You have to completely take charge of everything again." At the end of the season, once again, most of the cast was fired. Only John Lovitz, Dennis Miller, Whitney Brown, and Nora Dunn stayed on for the following season. This is perhaps the second time Carrey auditioned for a new season of SNL, where a majority of the cast was fired by the year's end. The following year, Carrey would get the opportunity to audition for SNL again. In February 2020, Carrey revealed an odd incident that happened to him as he was on his way to his 1986 audition. "I got out at NBC in the San Fernando Valley and was like, gosh, I hope this is a lucky day for me. I walked out of my car, closed the door, and I heard, 'Don't do it, don't jump.' I looked up at the top of the NBC building and there was a guy in a blue coat standing on the NBC logo trying to get his nerve up to jump off, and I went, not a good sign." Carrey revealed that he walked into the building not knowing whether or not he did it. All the news crews were gathering around the building. Now, this upcoming season featured new cast members like Dana Carvey, Phil Hartman, and Kevin Nealon that were chosen over a more seasoned Jim Carrey. Dana Carvey spoke to the New York Times in 2013 and revealed that he thought Carrey was going to get the spot over him. "My second audition was at a studio, probably in Burbank, where you had to go out in front of Lauren and a few cast members that had been left over from '85. Dennis Miller, John Lovitz, and Nora Dunn. It was very painful. There's no laughs, and I think at one point a fire alarm went off, and then I stopped, and then I did something, and then Lauren said, 'Do you have anything else?' We've sort of seen it. Phil Hartman was there, and Jim Carrey was there auditioning as well. He just stood on his pinky, and his whole body was straight in the air, and he put his foot over his head. I thought, oh, you're going to get it, Jim. We were in some kind of holding room, and I remember Phil saying to Jim, well, you'll get it, or at least a featured player. Unfortunately for Carrey, the third time wouldn't be the charm, as he was passed over once again. However, as Carrey's misfortune with sketch comedy had dragged on, at the same time Keenan Ivory Wayans was riding high off the success of his film, I'm Gonna Get You Sucker, and then fledgling Fox Network offered Wayans a production deal. That deal would lead to the creation of In Living Color, and he was invited to audition. I had known Damon through the stand-up circuit, and we were always kind of clocking each other. He kind of admired what I was doing on stage. He told me, hey crazy man, what do you think about coming into an audition for this thing? Come and meet my brother. By this point, Carrey had been in Los Angeles for nearly a decade, but it seemed like Hollywood didn't really know what to do with him. He starred in a short-lived NBC sitcom, The Duck Factory, and movies like Once Bitten, Peggy Sue Got Married, and Earth Girls are easy alongside soon-to-be co-star Damon, but nothing seems to make the impact like what was coming for him next. Keenan saw the tape of my SNL audition in which I played this racist guy who said the N-word. He thought I was an outlandish guy. Carrey was only one of the 150 performers campaigning for the gig during his initial In Living Color audition in Los Angeles. While Carrey admitted he didn't come with any characters prepared, he knew he had to do something to stand out, and when they began their improv session, something just clicked. I felt like the most important thing was to show them that I don't give a damn. Suddenly, I'd be a Scotsman, and suddenly, I'd be a pirate. I had to make really quick choices. I remember pulling out an impression of Nipsey Russell in the middle of one sketch. They were just falling on the ground. At that point, Jim became an obvious choice. Carrey was one of the first white guys that auditioned at that time, but the In Living Color team was not ready to call off the search just yet, and they auditioned several other people, including Adam Sandler, David Spade, and Rob Schneider. All three would go on to appear to be a part of the cast of NBC's Saturday Night Live. The second round of auditions included stand-up comedy at the Westwood Comedy Store. His stand-up was very alternative. He'd do all these crazy characters. One bit was about a guy who'd survive a nuclear attack. It was very dark, closer to performance art than traditional stand-up. Keenan was a fan of Carrey's impression, but wasn't quite sold beyond that and had to be persuaded by his younger brother Damon. After auditions concluded, it was time for deal negotiations for the cast, and that took a little longer than expected. All the performers had the standard 5-year deals and a clause in it that stated that cast would be paid equally, which was common for newer shows with ensemble casts. Due to his current resume of work, Carrey's asking price was much higher than the deal and broke the clause, which almost led Carrey to drop out. We probably saw 2,000 other white guys. All Keenan said was, "I want Jim Carrey. I want Jim Carrey," every damn day. It was, "Get me Jim Carrey." And Jim didn't want to do the show. He kept saying no. Carrey admitted to weighing his options, and it was even implied that Carrey was intimidated by possibly being the token white male actor on the show. But Carrey laughs off that notion. "No, to me, I knew Keenan and Damon and knew they were really creative, talented guys. The racial shit didn't concern me." Carrey would end up reaching a deal where he was paid the same amount for In Living Color as the rest of the cast, but he also got a separate deal to appear in a television movie called Doing Time on Maple Drive, which went on to receive 3 Emmy nominations. Carrey went on to appear on all 5 seasons of the groundbreaking sketch comedy show from April 15, 1990 to May 19, 1994. On In Living Color, Carrey was able to fully showcase his comedic capabilities, which a skill set that includes physical humor, impersonations, and exaggerated facial expressions, playing characters such as Fire Marshal Bill, Vero De Mello, the Background Guy, Grandpa Jack McGee, Jay Cordich, and his impersonation of Canadian reggae artist Snow. His characters are unlike any you had ever seen before on television and probably won't ever see on television again. That became one of the reasons why he stood out in a cast of other talented individuals. As far as physical comedy goes, it can be debated that In Living Color is where Carrey was able to take full advantage of his physical skills more than any other movie before or after his stint on the show. Carrey would eventually hit the SNL stage as a host in 1996, 2011, and 2014. Recently, he showed off his impression of Joe Biden and portrayed him during the 2020 election cycle. One could say that Jim Carrey's constant rejection from Saturday Night Live are what made him ready for In Living Color and his added success as a film star, eventually breaking the record and becoming the highest paid actor in Hollywood. In Living Color was a huge doorway for me, It was like The Thing basically. It was a lot of work put in before that, but that was the doorway, Stay up to date with the latest news and comedy by subscribing here to our YouTube channel, follow Comedy Hype across all social media, and look out for the original content, our new streaming service at comedyhype.com. For Comedy Hype News, I'm Terrence Sims.